Hello, everybody. Willie Mayer from Jazz Edge. Welcome to the Confident Improviser Q&A session / office hours session. So thank you very much, everyone, for your understanding and patience as I'm combining office hours and TCI for today, this week only. We will be having our normal schedule starting next week. And just as a quick reminder, next Thursday, the 18th, there is no TCI session. Remember, we're doing a TCI Q&A session every other Thursday. It would have normally been tomorrow, the 11th, but I have a conflict. So our next one is going to be on the 25th. While I also am, dealing with some of the housekeeping, let me also let you know that I'm going to be moving the TCI exercises release date to every other week. We are now going into a level 3 for TCI. We've done level 1, level 2, 10 exercises in each. Now we're moving on to level 3. We got another 10 exercises there. So the first release of level 3 is going to be next Friday, the 19th. Okay, so this Friday, we don't have any TCI being released. You still got 20 exercises in there that you can practice. Okay, so next Friday, the 19th, will be TCI number 21, which will be the first one in level 3. And then the following Thursday after that will be the Q&A session. The following Friday after that will be the next exercise. Following Thursday, Q&A session, so on and so forth. So we're going to be moving into an every other week schedule. Based on feedback that I got from students over the past few days. And it will also give you an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of catch up if need be. The exercises are going to inherently get more difficult and complicated as we go on. We are moving to level 3 after all. So that's it. All right. So today we have, you got me here for 2 hours. All right. We can talk anything music related, TCI, all of that. If you want to share any of your playing and get feedback, I'm more than happy to give you feedback. So let's jump right in. Don't be shy. Be sure to ask your questions. Welcome all of my friends on YouTube, on Facebook. For you guys, you can't unmute yourself, so just be sure to chat in your questions, and then I will kind of, pop back and forth over there and kind of see if there's any questions. For those of you who are joining me on Zoom, you can go ahead and ask your questions. If you have a long question and you're joining me on Zoom right now, if you just want to say, I have a question, I'll just go right down the chat list, and then, I see Bob. Okay, Bob, it says, I have a question. Go ahead, Bob. What's your question? You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, because if it's a little bit longer, I know it's a lot to type. All right, so with that said, let's dig in now. All right, so get some questions already. Gustavo, I'm struggling to find an accompaniment that works on slow songs, which keeps almost the same chord for a lot of measures. I tried 4 to the floor, but it feels very flat on 4 measures of B flat major 7, B flat 6, B flat 7. Should I try to reharm or a different kind of accompaniment instead? Here's the lead sheet. Let's take a peek. Okay, so obviously you're talking right in here, okay?
Yeah.
So how slow is this? Is it pretty slow for you?
It's kind of blues feel, like it works well with 4 to the floor. It's like a slow.
Okay, so all right. So what you're gonna want to do is, in a song like this, you could do like kind of a stride thing. Yeah, I did the E7 there before going into E flat. All right, so you can do like that kind of a stride thing, which is like root, fifth and the third, root, fifth and the seventh, root, fifth and the sixth, root, fifth and the seventh. So. You can start with that. You can expand from there as well. You know, like that kind of stuff where you're doing root and then chord, you know, root chord, fifth chord, that kind of stuff. Have you tried any of that?
No, I didn't try the stride. Yeah, the stride will have a bit more motion because I alternate between the root. I just tried 4 to the floor, and because between those 4 chords, it's basically one note difference.
Right. So
yeah, I was trying that.
And that would sound nice. Sure, you could do that as well. The 4 to the floor would sound nice. You know, the other thing too is sometimes you could even like kind of like break up that 4 to the floor. You know, kind of like make that almost like a bass line of sorts as well. The other thing you could. So there, kind of just pedaling the fifth of the chord as well. You know? It's a funky little thing there, like that jump there. It's a little fingering.
Yeah, it's hard to.
Yeah, it's a little fingering pain in the patoot there. Yeah. So anyway, you could try some of that stuff. You could also like do a bass line. You could like you know, throw a bass line underneath that as well. You know, even doing your shells. The other thing you could do as well is you could even take like a pattern, like a blues shuffle kind of pattern. Like check this out. Now notice what I did here. I played root 5 up to the root 6, right? And I'm playing that over all of the chords because guess what? This pattern right here with these notes is ubiquitous enough that it could be played over any of those chords, right? So like I'm just playing root 5 to root 6. Right. So and then you know, notice when I go to the B flat 7, that's when I could bring in that dominant chord. Now, one thing that's kind of nice is when you have this is like B flat. This is all B flat major. These 3 chords are all B flat major. Here is when you bring in that dominant sound. So you could do. So you see there on the dominant chord. That's where I can like really bring that chord in, and that chord is what pushes me to the E flat. So anyway, that should give you some ideas to kind of play around with, Gustavo, and you can work it out from there.
Okay, thank you.
Nice job. I'm gonna bump back and forth here between. Let's see. Nope. Hold on. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right. So, Jeff, couldn't make the coaching session, but I have a SPTD video I'd like feedback on. Can't stay for the call for long, unfortunately. All right. No problem. All right. Singing with two-handed comping.
The falling leaves drift by my window. The autumn leaves are red and gold. I see your lips, the summer kisses, the sunburned hands I used to hold. Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear a winter song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. Autumn leaves start to fall.
Hey, real nice job. Very good job, Jeff. All right, so a lot of stuff that I really enjoyed in this. I love how you sang it in E minor, but then when you went to G minor there, you played the melody. I thought that was great. Like, because obviously in the lesson we move from one key to the next, and being able to obviously sing it in both keys is probably going to be a challenge due to range. So that was a smart idea of like going from one key and then playing the melody in another key. Right, so it kind of creates a nice create some nice excitement, right? Especially since the key is modulating up, like that. So that was good. Thank you for time's sake. I know you didn't go back and sing, but obviously I'm sure you're probably already thinking this, but just in case you're not, I would definitely go back, sing the song back in E minor. You already did the transition back to E minor. So I think that you were on that same frame of mind as well. Be careful with the, like with that left hand, like a little bit too staccato like that. Just be careful with that technique that you don't start getting your hand into a thing in which it's like really kind of jerking back super quick like that. You could get yourself into a bad habit. When you're doing the, when you're doing the 4 to the floor as well, see how I don't have to, I don't want to come back too far like this, and I also don't want it to be too short like that. I want it to be, it's really more of that grabbing in like that. Let me just do those 2 chords. Notice the pinky and the thumb, real subtle grab right there. All right, so you see that grabbing that I'm doing, real subtle. And what I'm trying to do on that 4 to the floor is really drive in that tempo Speaking of tempo, make sure that right now you're playing it in kind of like cocktail piano vibe. Totally fine, nothing wrong with that. But I just need to make sure that you understand that the tempo is a little bit more free form right now, right? So it's kind of like I can't really like get into that and say, all right, this is what the tempo is. So if you're going to play along with a bass player or drummer at some point down the road, if that tempo is not really locked in, it's going to be more difficult for them to be able to follow you. So some of that is just when you moved into the other key, it probably just needs a little bit more practice as well. Thinking about what chord's coming next, totally fine, completely get it. But just bear that in mind for your practice. Make sure that if you want to practice it kind of loose, fine. Rubato, the autumn leaves. You can like do as loose as you want, but make sure that you're also practicing it with tempo. Make sure that you're practicing it in time so that if you're in a situation in which you're going to play along with the band, you're not getting into that situation in which they're like grumbling in the background, like, oh, a cocktail piano player, can't play in time. And that does happen. Sometimes, players will get into a bad habit of this loose time. And then when they actually are playing with other musicians who are following time, then it all kinds of falls apart. So just want to make sure that you're paying attention to that. And during your practice, you're being cognizant of that and making sure that you're putting in some practice time that's really just metronomic, right? That's where the iReal Pro track is great, or utilizing a metronome. But besides that, I think this sounded really great. Nice job. I'm not sure if you're on, but if you're on, you can go ahead and unmute and ask any questions you might have. Oh, actually, sorry, I see some other questions here. Improving my two-handed comping bass lines improves a few times limit. Be more effective to focus on only one technique for all 12. Okay, and then how do I start to get away from looking at the lead sheet? I wouldn't worry too much right now about getting away from looking at the lead sheet, right? Because, and the reason is that, if you weren't trying to do all of this other stuff, then I would say, okay, fine. Then you can like focus on getting away from the lead sheet. But one technique that I like to do, I don't have, well, here, this is like old sheet music. A lot of times I'll have like sheet music in front of me, right? And then I'll play it. But then what I'll do is I'll kind of put it over here, right? And then I'll kind of glance at it, and then I'll put it down there and kind of glance at it that way. Just looking at myself, my COVID hair. Oh my goodness, I need a haircut, right? So that's how I like to do it, like kind of move it so that then I'm kind of memorizing it. It's still there if I need to glance at it. The other thing too is taking this stuff along with you, print it out, and looking at it away from the piano is a great way of being able to memorize it. And obviously analysis is a big part of that as well. We do the analysis in SPDD, so you can go ahead and take a look at the analysis of it, and that will help. Now, to your other question, there's many different layers to Standards by the Dozen. We have the lead sheet, we got the bass line, we got the shells, rootless chords, two-handed comping, and then improv. So we got 6 different things that we have going on there. What I suggest that you do is that's a lot to practice, okay? I mean, let's call it what it is. And with a new standard coming out every single month, that's a lot, to get under your fingertips. So the two-handed comping is really if you're going to be playing with a group, okay? So if you're not playing with a group right now, I wouldn't worry about the two-handed comping. Or if you're not thinking, hey, look, I want to be playing with a group, sooner rather than later. If that's not the answer, then you can just put the two-handed comping off to one side for right now. If you're going to be playing mostly solo piano, then the shells, the bass line, going to be super important for you. The bass line is going to be really important as well. Even though you're not going to play a bass line all of the time, it's going to be important to be able to have that fluidity in the left hand and be able to have that ability to be able to drive if you want to, like, if you want to be able to drive that home and be able to play that and do some improv over it, having that bass line is nice to have under your fingertips. The shells are great for the obvious reason, it's a great foundation. Rootless chords are really good for solo piano as well, but you're going to have to like kind of bring the root in now and again in order to establish that root, the root motion. So typically, rootless chords are usually more of a group style playing. Okay, it's not to say that you don't use them in solo piano playing, but they need a little bit more finesse. Right? Other questions, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was basically it, Willie. Thanks. Yeah.
Nice job. Sounded really good, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of material,
Yeah.
Well,
you're doing it. You're doing it.
Yeah.
Keep working at it, right? And I've explained the concept before of going wide versus going deep. And just real quickly, I know, for some of you are like, oh, I've heard this before, but there are some that are on that might not have heard it. So let me just explain it quickly. Going wide means you take one concept and you apply it to many different songs. And the idea is that you get better at that one concept. For instance, playing shells, right? Take, 5, 6, 10, 12 standards, and then play shells in the left hand while doing the melody in the right hand. Going deep means that, okay, I'm going to take just Autumn Leaves. I want to do shells. I want to do bass line. I want to do two-handed comping. I want to, modulate into other keys. I want to get all my improv. I want to, flesh out my arrangement. Okay. Nothing wrong with doing that either. But now you find yourself kind of, like all in on, for instance, Autumn Leaves, to use that as an example. You're all in on Autumn Leaves for potentially months. And then this has happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to, many of you as well, that you go all in for months on something and then you kind of move on to something else. You let it go. And then you're like, oh yeah, Autumn Leaves. Let me come back and play that. And you're like, now you lost all of that, right? Or it first appears that you lost it all. You really didn't lose it all. It's still within there, but you got to practice to get it back. That's the challenge of going deep on something, is that you could spend so much time working on, getting down just the perfect arrangement for a song that then if you don't play that over and over and over again, you'll lose it, right? And then even if you understand the analysis of it, you understand all the theory, sometimes it's just a physical thing. You could do all this kind of stuff on the song right now, but then you let it go for a few months, you go back to it. Well, you haven't been moving your fingers like that. You haven't been practicing that like that. So you're going to have to put in some more time practicing. That's where I find that the going wide is a little bit better, because when you go wide, you're just constantly hitting, like, for instance, another example, you're hitting those shells all the time. You're hitting the shells, hitting the shells, hitting the shells, different melody, but you're constantly attacking those shells. And then that's going to help you really get down those shells much better, right? So it's a personal choice, right? You just want to kind of think about, do I want to get more songs under my repertoire quickly? Or do I really want to have more arrangements that are like whiz bang, like, whoa, that is just incredible, So hopefully that helps, Jeff.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Willie.
You got
Appreciate
it. Jude, everything will be on the calendar? Yes. So in the calendar on the live training page, all of the standards by the dozen stuff is in there. It's already, it should also be up in the live training. Yeah. So if you go up to the live training menu, you'll also see which call it here. So if I go up to live training, right, you see the sessions right in here. But if you go to the calendar, in the calendar, you'll see all of those sessions listed right in here as well. Just as a quick reminder, remember the first standards by the dozen lesson, right, is music released. Kind of hard to read that, but see how it says music released. So that just happened yesterday. Actually, it happened on Monday. I was able to get it out at least a day earlier. So that first week is me just releasing the sheet music, right? So you have all of that from Misty right now. Next Tuesday, 10 a.m., we're going to do the live training session. During that live training session, I'm going to teach the whole lesson, all of the sections. Remember, that's the one. It's super long, probably going to be 3-4 hours, and that will also be in webinar format, meaning that I won't see you. You won't share your camera or anything like that, but you're able to chat in your questions if you have them. All right. Go ahead, Mark. Mark is going to play Autumn Leaves for us. You there, Mark? You need to unmute yourself, Mark. No, you're still muted, Mark.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
Can you hear me? All right. Last week, Willie, you suggested I try the iReal Pro when I do Autumn Leaves. I do have a tendency to rush, and I'm finding it doesn't change with iReal Pro. I have to constantly slow myself down.
Right,
but I think it's a good discipline. So here's what it sounds like with iReal Pro. Whoops, it's ending. Let's try it again.
All right, cool. Mark, I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice, very nice. All right, so there's a couple of things I want to go through with you on this. Before I do that, a couple of things I wanted to just quickly say. Patrick just asked, he has to leave soon. No problem. You guys are welcome to come and go. Where do you find the recording of this? Go into the community area. So in the community area, it's going to be under both the office hours and the TCI, right? So if you go into the community area, you go into where it says the live training, you'll see the replays right in there. The other thing I also wanted to mention as well is for those of you that are joining me streaming, when I start to, all right, so don't bother writing in and saying, the piano sounds terrible. It's because it's streaming, right? In the recording, it sounds perfect and studio quality and all of that, but streaming, It's just, unfortunately, it is what it is. So especially if you're joining in on YouTube or on Facebook right now, you might find that the piano sounds pretty awful. All right. So just try and let that go for right now. Check out the recording. All right. So now, for you, Mark, on this, the beauty of what you have going on is you have like almost no limit to the ideas for improvisation. Okay, so you got a whole slew of ideas going on. Okay, which is great, right? So that's kind of a better place to be than you don't have any ideas to play when you improvise. So you got a lot of good ideas, but now it's the execution of the ideas. And there are there's actually three. There's three things that I would definitely suggest. Number one, record yourself, listen back to the articulation, right? So it's a lot of like, you know, the attack on some of the notes are kind of hard and sometimes a little bit too staccato. It's not as much of like, right? So not as much of the legato as that I would like to, you know, I'd like to hear in that. So I'd like to hear some more of those weaving lines. So that's one thing to take a listen to. The other thing, obviously, which you already know, is the time, playing along with the iReal Pro track and making sure that you're in time. Be sure to slow it down. You don't have to play it that fast. In fact, I would suggest playing it slower to start, okay? Now, the third thing, and this is really, really important, I want to dive into this a little bit more because this is beneficial not only to you, but to everyone else, is the concept of playing and resting, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up here Autumn Leaves, okay? And I'm not going to use my rendition. I'm going to use the one that you can get right off the iReal Pro forums because it'll make it a little bit bigger here so you can see, okay? So what I'm going to do is, I have my tempo set to 166. Now, I'm going to put this on 110 for right now, okay? And playing and resting is this, and this is kind of nice. I can kind of show you this, all right? So in a play rest, you might play for 2 measures, rest for a measure. Play for 2 measures. Oops, get that out of there. You know, play for another 2 measures, right? And then rest for that measure. Play for 2 measures, rest for a measure, right? You might play, rest, okay? You might even just play like the entire first line and then rest for 1 measure. So there's many different ways of doing this. But here's the real question we have to answer. What is meant by playing and resting? The resting happens in the right hand, not the left hand. So it could if you wanted to, especially if you're playing with a band, but typically you'll still keep the chords going, but it's the right hand line that you just give it a little bit of time to breathe. So that sounds like this. See how I'm resting? Rest. Right, now, do you notice what's happening there? Now, listen to what happens if I don't rest, right? Now I'm just going to like kind of just play a bunch of ideas. And what you should notice when listening to it is that notice how it just like kind of like all, like there's no definition to a line, okay? Take a listen to that. You know, yeah, because you hear it, it's like I'm just playing so much. I'm like bombarding the listener with all of this stuff, okay? Whereas now if I start my improvisation like this. right? So you see how I can like change it around, and now I'm gonna get the listener more interested in what I'm doing. I'm not playing the same rhythm. Notice how it sounds like. Some of them I'll play a line that's a little bit faster, bringing in some 16th notes, triplets, stuff like that. Okay, but notice how when I'm starting my improv, I kind of ease into it, right? I don't have to always ease into it. So don't misconstrue and think that like every time you start a solo, you got to ease into it like that. No, but for this particular solo right now, I'm making the decision that since I want to kind of do some playing and resting, I'm going to kind of ease into the solo, kind of have a little bit of an idea, then change the idea again. The other thing is that I want one idea to kind of flow into the next idea. Listen to what happens. I'm going to give you an example of how one idea is not flowing into another idea. Right? So it's like I'm all over the place, right? I got one idea here, then something else, and something else. So now I'll play, and then right? So did you hear I started with right? So you hear how I'm like kind of bump, ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. See how I'm like taking that idea, and now I'll start to develop that idea. So one thing you want to bring into your playing is that playing and resting. Play, rest, right? Take those ideas that you have, and rather than dumping them all out all at once, I want you to kind of pick in and sprinkle them. Okay? All right, I'm going to give you a little bit more.
Can I try it?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. By the way, Mark, you have the piano sound going on in there. You're going to want to pull out that piano sound on iReal Pro. Okay? So don't worry about it now. I'm going to do a tutorial on that, and you can join in on that, and I'll explain it. But you're not going to want to play along with the piano while you're also playing, the piano track. So why don't you do this? Why don't you play just the right hand? Don't do any left hand. Just improvise with the right hand, and I want to hear some playing and resting. Okay, now let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there. So instead, what I want, are you playing in E minor?
E minor, yeah.
Yeah, I'll bring it down to E minor. All right, so. All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to, on some of the chords, literally play nothing in the right hand. Okay, so I'll start on the A minor chord. Nothing on G minor or C major. And then I'll. Okay, so play on A minor and D7. Do nothing on G major and C7. Play on F sharp and B. Do nothing on E. Go ahead, try that. No. You're playing on. You played on G and C. I don't want anything in the right hand on G and C. Okay, so you can play whatever you want on A and D.
Not in my hands.
So you can play whatever you want on A and D. That's fine. You got free reign there. But when you get here, the only thing you could do is left hand only.
Got it.
Try it again. All right. So now I want you to do it again, Mark. I'm gonna let you do it one more time. But now this time, when you play G and C, I don't want two hand chords, just the left hand. Okay. So the right hand is going to do nothing. All right. So you're literally going to.
Got it.
Try it. So now, so you can see what's happening is you are so ingrained in playing with that right hand. When you got to the C major, you brought the right hand back in.
Yeah,
right?
came back.
Yeah. So that's something that you're going to want to practice. And then this is a
One
great
more
exercise.
time. One more time.
Go ahead. Last time. There you go. There you go. All right, good. So I'm going to want you to practice that, and that's a great thing for any of you who are a little bit more advanced to definitely be bringing that into your improvisation. Play, rest. Play, rest. When I was studying up at Berkeley, I had improvisation classes with Hal Crook, who, if you don't know Hal Crook, is like he's literally like one of the world's best improvisers. He is an absolute genius. He plays trombone, and he is just an incredible improviser. Great teacher too. And one thing that he talked about is, you wait till your third urge to play. So basically, like every time, like, you're playing, you have an urge to jump in, wait till your third urge, right? And then, of course, you can play around with that and, say, like, wait till your second, third, fourth urge to play, but just kind of think of that concept of waiting for your third urge before you actually play something in the right hand. All right, nice job, Mark.
Thank you.
Let's see. Bruno, go ahead. Do you have a question?
Hey, Willie, can you hear me?
Yep, I got you. How you doing, man?
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you. Just want to ask for something that you said before. I'm at this moment, I want to prepare a couple of songs, and what you say before about getting all into something, especially in Autumn Leaves, I'm trying to, as you said, trying to put more emphasis on this one. So then when I come back to the other ones, which I'm not doing all in on those ones, it's kind of funny the way I'm trying to keep my studying, especially I'm doing like an hour and a half, 2 hours per day because of my work. So my question is, as your experience from before, do you recommend that I should do less maybe in a specific song and do like the same, root and shelf in many songs, and then once I get like a couple of songs, then I might go in deeper into a particular one, right? And that's my first question. And the second question, I saw a video of you once. You say when you're playing gigs, what your tips about warming up, making like scales or whatever. If you have a keyboard, you just put the volume down. But what happens if you have a piano? Then you can't put the volume down, right? So what would you do in that case if you got people around, and what would you do to warm up and not making scales, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's take the second question first, the warm up. So so for those of you that might have missed that video, basically what I'm saying that Bruno, thank you for bringing up, is if I'm on a keyboard, obviously I can just turn the volume down and do 5-finger scales or whatever, right? So that's absolutely fine. If you have if you're at an acoustic instrument and you can't, turn off the sound, then probably you're just going to have hands off on the keyboard, right? Because like anything you do, you're likely going to make a sound. So this is where, you can take something like, a desk or something. You can, believe it or not, even do like 5-finger scales, just warming up on a desk like this, right? And I'm just kind of going up and down my 5-finger scales. Okay, well, 5-finger scales. Like I'm playing 5 fingers, right? There's no scale there, right? But I could do that. I could even go through songs and then kind of conceptualize what the melody is going to be, right, even by playing it on a desk like that, right? The other thing that's important is warming up in terms of stretching, and then also if you could like put any warm water, on your arms. One thing like I've said many times before, Bill Evans used to go underneath the hair dryer or underneath the dryer in the bathroom, right? The hand dryer, warming up his hands. Other musicians, Glenn Gould used to soak his arms in hot water. Okay, so those are the types of things that we would typically do to warm up? Because remember, it is a warming up and preparing and getting ready for a gig is a multi-pronged approach. Number one is obviously the physical, right? And then within the physical, you have not just your fingers. This is what we normally think about, right? But you have your whole body as well. And, you know, up here in the Northeast, you know, I'm going to be doing a live stream next Saturday and doing a gig, and, you know, it's cold up here. So now if I can't actually warm up while I'm at the gig, well, how do I get my body warm? And as silly as it sounds, some things that you could do is things like, you know, squats, right? You know, like just even stuff like that. And the reason it's silly is because, yeah, it seems like, what are you doing, squats? But you're using a big muscle group. And when you use that big muscle group, it generates heat in the body, right? And then that's a good way of just kind of like warming up the core. Then I would do stretches, you know, like on a door, stretching out, door frame, you know, all that good stuff, you know, all of those stretches that you can do. All of that would be good. Obviously, taking it easy and going slow and making sure that you don't hurt yourself before you actually have to play. Okay, so that's all the warm-up stuff. The other question about going wide versus deep, a lot of that is, you know, like I've said, I don't really like the term goals, because goals are just like thrown out so much, right? You know, like it's constantly all we ever hear about is goals. What's your goal? What's your goal? What's your goal? Instead, you know, I think a better word is the word focus, because focus to me is ongoing, where a goal is, there you go, like literally a goal post. You get right there, you got a goal, right? So a goal is like kind of like an end game kind of thing. So rather than thinking about it, rather than asking, what is your goal at the piano? Instead, I think, what is your focus? Because focus starts to change, okay? You know, you can change your focus, and that's perfectly fine to change your focus with, you know, playing music, all right? It's actually a good thing, because imagine, like, you know, if your focus is playing classical music, fine, nothing wrong with that. That's great. Okay, focus on that. But if you were never allowed to change your focus, then you might never get into jazz or bossa nova or whatever types of music you might be interested in, right? So the suggestion I would have is, like, you know, think about your focus in terms of, like, where do you want to be in the next few months? What's most important to you? Is it repertoire? Right? Because if it's repertoire and building up your repertoire, then yes, then probably playing and utilizing just one concept and going through several songs using that one concept would be a good way to kind of build up your repertoire. Bearing in mind that you're building up your repertoire using just one concept. Okay, fine, right? It's not the biggest thing, not the be-all, end-all, but at least you have now a repertoire of, say, 12 tunes, all with shells. You know, so then you got to answer the question for yourself is, do I want 12 songs all using that, or do I want one song where, like, you know, like, oh, there's this big grandiose arrangement that I'm going to have to work out and practice, right? Both directions are perfectly fine, and that's where it becomes a personal choice.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, one last question that I have. I don't know if I can move my. Would you be able to see this? I'm practicing this at the moment.
Hold on, let me switch my view so I can.
I don't know if you can really see it. Wait, this way probably.
Yeah.
One teacher that I had before there told me that it might get. You
can put it down now. I just took I just took a screenshot of it.
There you go. Yeah. Will I get in a bad habit if I start? You know, like again, I just started. It might sound kind of slow, right? But sorry. So. Yeah, I mean, I just started, but the thing is, will I get into a bad habit for studying that, like in a memory way, memorizing that, or is it a good thing to study and then from this I will get some ideas and then you know what I mean, like so or should I do the TCI instead, you know, and understanding where I'm going or what I'm doing if that makes sense.
Sure. All right. So first of all, there's nothing wrong with doing this, but for anyone taking a look at this, immediately right here, you're gonna see something like that. Okay. Best of luck. Right. How many of you are going to be able to reach that? Right.
Yeah.
So now the problem is, like, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. Okay. But there's teachers that they play and they play extremely well, and then they teach, right? And then there are teachers that understand the kind of more of the educational process and teach, right? And I try to consider myself more of the latter. I would never write this because I know that the amount of students that could actually play this is so incredibly few that this like this kind of stuff, like what happens is you're like, okay, I'm going to practice this. And then you get to this, and then now it all kind of comes to a screeching halt. You know, either you feel frustrated, like, oh, geez, I can't hit those notes. Am I supposed to be able to hit them? What's wrong with me? What am I supposed to play instead? So now you just, like, on these 3 notes, just like went through all of this, like, mental gymnastics and upset, trying to figure out what's going on with this, right? Because those were written in there when really they shouldn't be written in there, okay? I'm sure that these lines are great. I can't see any more of it, but sure, like there's nothing wrong with working through these lines and taking a look at that. But again, this is not bite-sized. This is this is there's a lot of notes going on here. This is like kind of like a consistent 8th note pattern, which is good, and I actually recommend doing this. But I usually recommend doing that in more of the inspiration lessons for more advanced players.
All right.
So there's nothing wrong with playing this. This would be fine. I'm not saying that my stuff is the only stuff out there. Of course not. Right? You should definitely seek out other, other pieces of music.
Yeah.
TCI though is specifically designed to be step by step by step by step. Okay, so what you should have noticed already in TCI is that obviously lesson 1 is much different than lesson 20, right? Exercise number 20, and you can start to see how we're bringing in concepts, right? Preparing concepts, bringing in a concept, reviewing the concept, showing you different ways of utilizing it. So I am confident and convinced and believe in the educational integrity of TCI. And what I mean by that is that I believe that it if a light shined on it, it will hold up to scrutiny about how the material has been presented to the student so that you find the most success. This kind of stuff, as cool as it might be, it just kind of dumps in your lap, right? And now you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to play this. But then the question is, you start scratching your head afterwards. You're like, well, this is great. I got this down, but how do I use it? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's my whole point. So before starting getting again deep into this, I wanted to ask you: will I waste my time doing this? I mean, not wasting my time, but yeah, it might sound pretty. But if you ask me, okay, yeah, what are you doing, Bruno? Well, no idea. So maybe it's better to it's understanding with the TCI, going basic, and then maybe if when I get advanced, okay, that might make sense.
Right. And then I would suggest that because as you get more advanced, then you could take a look at something like this. And then now you're going to start to already also know that, like, okay, I don't have to play my 3rd up there. I could just do my shell down there, right? You've kind of experienced all of that stuff. So then you don't get kind of hung up on this kind of stuff. And then, this isn't going to, screw you up. And then you can start to like pick apart these lines like, oh, okay. Okay. Oh, actually, that should be a B flat. Okay. Actually, I would have done a B natural there myself, actually. And then, so this is like kind of like utilizing the altered scale of sorts, and then also some chromaticism in there. And then, you kind of get your approach into the B and to the C here. I would have done a B natural here, though. I think that would have sounded nicer as a B natural than a B flat. Okay.
You did it naturally when you were playing.
Yeah. It's I like the sharp 11 going up to there. But anyway, that's the point. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, absolutely fine. You can do it. I would say this. Any of that other stuff that's outside of the core material that you're working on, if you have the time for it, you have the brain space for it, and it's not going to take you away from your core practice, have at it. Nothing wrong with it, right? But if you find that you're like digging into that so much, and it's like, oh, how do I use this? Or, how do I use it? Well, now the challenge then becomes, if I don't know if that you get that from a teacher or wherever, it doesn't matter. I don't need to know. But unless that person is then going to sit down and explain it to you, now you're in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You got it. Bruce, you're up next, but let me see. I just want to see if there's any questions. All right, I see got people over here on YouTube and Facebook, but Abaloo, thank you very much for your comment. Great piano player and music educator. Thank you. I appreciate the comment. Thank you. And just again, anyone on YouTube, Facebook, if you guys have any questions, feel free to chat in your question. All right, Bruce, go ahead. You had a wide versus deep.
Yeah, this seems to be a popular topic today, Willie. So I've got trapped into going deep on Autumn Leaves.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to a lot of tunes, you kind of say, well, I like that, I like that, I like that. And I got to really pull back because I want to run before I walk. And you want to grab all that, and you want to just make the best arrangement you can.
Mm-hmm.
And when you learn something, implement it. But just answering some of your questions, what's your priority? Well, my priority's got to be developing a repertoire because I have none. But so my question is, if I was to prioritize, and I'm playing solo piano for the most part, but I enjoy playing with iReal Pro, but you can still play solo piano with iReal Pro, just don't use the bass. Do I get less involved with rootless chord voicings? Is that more for playing with other musicians? Or because that's a pretty important topic. So I'm trying to figure out, the melody in the improvising, the walking bass, the chords. I mean, they're all important. The comping I can put aside, but the question is, what do I really put aside if I really want to develop a repertoire, but I don't want it to be an elementary sounding repertoire. I want it to have some gusto to it. So I'm kind of in that middle ground. Can you go sort of like a little deep?
Sure, absolutely. All right, so let's take your last point that you made. You want to have a repertoire, but you want it to have some gusto to it. Okay, so I think we're all adults on the call. So as adults, we understand, and the reason I say that is because as children, we really don't think about that stuff, right? We don't worry about it, or we don't think about the larger concepts involved in being able to get to that point of making an arrangement that has gusto with it. Whereas adults, we kind of understand, but unfortunately, as adults, we forget, right? Or maybe we understand, but we just choose to put a blind eye to it, right? Like not really think about it. And what I'm saying is, in order to have an arrangement that has gusto, right? Obviously, you need a bunch of techniques. Okay, so let's forget music for right now, and instead let's say that we're going to give a speech. Okay, so I want to give a speech to a room full of people on a topic. Doesn't matter what it is. Okay, and I want that speech to be empowering and poignant and eloquent and all of that. I'm going to use all of those words, and those are kind of like some of the same words that we might say. That's what I want my arrangement to be. Okay, but now what are you going to say to me, right? If I want that eloquent, poignant speech, what do I need, right? So what are the things that I need? I first of all need technique, right? I need the technique to be able to actually project and speak. If I'm like, okay, so I'm talking like this, right? Obviously, no, that's not going to work. So I need to have the technique to get the ideas from here and get them out physically out of my mouth, right? So that you can understand what it is that I'm saying. I also need vocabulary, right? And in a vocabulary, if I want to be eloquent and poignant and whatnot, it's not going to be, this basic vocabulary. I'm going to have to start to use words that have a little bit more gusto to them, a little bit more of a shine to them. My vocabulary, if I've never developed my vocabulary, then it's going to be very difficult for me to have the vernacular to be able to deliver this speech that is going to get somebody, whoa, engaged. So when you're creating these arrangements, you have all of these different columns, these pillars, right? That you have to develop. You need your technique, you need your rhythm, you need your accompaniments. Are you going to solo? How are you going to interpret the melody, right? So you have all of this different stuff, all of these different columns, right? Or categories you can think about, right? And I want you to visualize for a minute a table, right? And then you have these different columns in that table, right? And then when you're listening to Bill Evans or Keith Jarrett, those things are all pegged up here. Oh, rhythm, pegged. Phrasing, pegged. Improvisational lines, pegged. Like dynamics, all of it. Like they're masters of it, right? They have all of that pegged. You can also think of it like an equalizer with volume, right? And they're all red. They're all up at the top, right? But now for us mere mortals and human beings, right? Ours are like kind of like a little bit more down here, right? They're like, maybe you're really good at rhythm and maybe you're really good at your, I don't know, your shelves, but everything else in between might be a little bit, lacking.
Yeah.
So we need to keep that in mind when we're thinking like, okay, if we're going to go wide on a concept like utilizing shells, we want to make sure that we're realistic with what's happening, right? We don't want to think that like, oh, I'm just going to play shells and then my arrangements are going to be like, the best thing since sliced bread. No, they're still going to sound basic. But the concept of going wide versus going deep is that what do we need to do to get all that stuff up, right? What is it? It's real simple. Practice, right? It's practice, practice, over, right? So when I sit down and I'm playing an arrangement, I'm not utilizing one concept. I'm utilizing a half dozen to a dozen different concepts. And I've learned all this stuff over decades, plural, not even a single decade. This is like 30 years of playing, actually more than 30 years. I've been playing, like over 40 years. So obviously, with 40 years of experience playing this instrument, of course, I'm going to have things that, I'm going to be able to hit and be able to play that someone that only has a year or two won't be able to. So how do we like kind of conceptualize this to make ourselves feel better about it? The going wide allows you to focus on one technique so that then you could really get down that one technique, right? Now, again, it's not going to mean that like, oh boy, your arrangement's going to sound like whiz bang. No, but at least while utilizing that one technique, you're able to come up with something that's going to sound halfway decent as long as you really know that technique. Let me give you a for instance. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load up my real book here. Okay, let me just find it. All right, and let's just go through, and I'm just going to show. So let me just grab a tune here. Grab a tune that's actually going to work. Okay, this will be good. I Should Care. It's a nice tune. All right, so let's say that I want to. I want to come in here and I want to play I Should Care. So like I might play. Oops. How do I want to do it? right? So I'm going to play this, and I'm going to utilize all these concepts that I've learned over the years. Maybe I'm going to, do a bass line, whatever it is. But this is concepts, like I said, I've been working on over years and years to be able to just be able to spit it out. So you take one concept, like the shells. Okay? But now even with the shells, you notice how my interpretation of the melody is not just right? There's like, I'm interpreting that melody. So in fairness, I'm playing the shells here, but I'm also doing some rhythmic, some melodic interpretation. And then also my rhythm is relatively strong in this as well. Right? So even though I'm focusing on one concept of just utilizing shells here in my left hand, I need to do it really well. If I don't, then right, then it all falls apart. But if I can do it well, then I can get a sound like. Right? So there we go. Now, is that whiz bang, blow, your hat off? No, of course not. But at least it gets the job done. And then from there, now I can start to build onto that, right? But the point is that like when you're going wide, the one concept that you're working on is not like it's not meant to like make your arrangement sparkle necessarily. It's meant to make it so that that concept that you're working on, you really start to lock it into your fingers, okay? And then not just your fingers, but also in your ears as well, that you could start to hear this. So then you take the concept and you apply it someplace else. It's a man in a green shirt. Come on. Some of these tunes are like not going to be. And the other thing you're going to notice is that sometimes some tunes are going to work well with shells and some are not. Like. Right? So, okay, fine. You can go through and you can find some other classic standards. What about this one, actually? Let's get right into the tune here. I'd probably just do root fives. Right? What you'll notice is that some of this stuff, especially like you see D right there, it doesn't say anything. You might say, oh, maybe I'll play major seventh. Okay, maybe you could get away with that. Maybe major seventh there. Oh, but it goes to a dominant there. Right? So sometimes you're gonna kind of like work with it and try and figure out what's gonna be the best. But do you see how like that idea of like, you're just working that one concept so that you could really lock that concept under your fingertips? Make sense, Bruce?
Yep. Because sometimes I think, what I at the end of the year, would I rather have 12 standards under my belt that are okay, but I really am good at chord shells, or would I be happier with 6 standards with a little bit more gusto, put it that way? So I kind of go in between those two thoughts.
One thing I would suggest to everyone is, well, I'll tell you my personal opinion. I would rather have 12 songs with shells and know what the heck I'm doing in the left hand and the right hand than have 6 songs in which I've worked out all this stuff, but I'm kind of like, what did I do? And why did I do that there again? Okay. So I would rather have the songs down with concepts that I feel 100% confident about. Right. Because then like logic says that if I know the concept, I know the shells, I know the melody, I know how to do that all together, then that means that I should then theoretically be able to pick up just about any song then and be able to apply that concept to it.
Good point.
You know? And then that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the ability to learn something and then duplicate, right? Versus, oh, I learned that one thing and it works great over this tune, but guess what? I don't know how to use it anywhere else. To me, that's inefficient.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you, say if you take, say, 3 standards in a row and you just work the shells and you say to yourself, because everyone's at different levels, and if you say to myself, good, I got these shells, you know, under control here. So maybe I can sort of add another technique or something like that and go for the next 3 stand build instead of going through the whole 12. If I feel comfortable, or I got these shells down where they're actually boring now. They're boring. I know them so well.
Yeah. Like if you're at the point in which
something else that challenges me,
like I wouldn't be playing shells in an arrangement, right? So I mean, I would be doing other stuff because I would, exactly like you said, I would get bored with it, right? So once you get to the point in which you feel as though you know the concept 80%, it's that whole 80-20. Once you think you got about 80% of it down, and in which it's like, if you see like, these shells and you can like, oh, okay, bam, I can hit these shells like, pretty lickety split. Okay, then fine. Then add in something else. Absolutely. Now, the other thing you're going to notice too is, especially like, I don't know if you've noticed in the Misty lesson, we're bringing in shells, but now I'm starting to add in those other notes underneath in the right hand, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just shells anymore. Now we're doing shells with a little twist there as well.
Yeah.
So you could start to do stuff like that as well, in which it's like, okay, it's not just shells, but now I'm starting to add in some other stuff underneath there. Okay.
All right.
Look, let's make this super simple. Here's the reality of it, is that in order to be a good pianist, okay, and I'm going to say good artist because this is for any discipline of art, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's dance, if it's theater, if it's acting, if it's painting, okay? That there are many different concepts within each one of those disciplines that you need to get down, right, in order to be at the top of your game. Okay, so if we're just taking piano, for instance, okay, well, number one, you got to have technique. If you don't have the technique to play it, well, then you might as well just call it a day because you're not going to have the technique, right? So it goes back to the whole idea of vocabulary. If you don't have the vocabulary, you can't enunciate, all of that kind of stuff, then don't worry about giving the speech until you can actually enunciate your words and make it so that people can understand you.
Right.
So each of these techniques takes sometimes an inordinate amount of time to get down and to master. That's the reality, right? So as simple of a concept of like, oh, play all 12 major scales, contrary motion. Yeah, I got that. Do you really have it, right?
Yeah.
Do you really know all of your keys? You really know all your sharps, flats? You really know all of your chords? You really know all your rootless voices, all of your chord shells, all of your bass line stuff, all of your comping, all of your tritone substitutions, dominant motions, related 2/5s, right? Go on and on and on and on and on. I mean, it's endless. There's so much information. You will never, ever learn it all. I know like that much of information, okay? Whereas Keith Jarrett knows like that much, like he knows a lot more. But guess what? There's still no one person will ever learn it all. So with that in mind, right, now the reason for wide versus deep is that when we go deep, we're trying to pull all of these, different concepts that we may or may not have, or we have at different levels. We're throwing all those concepts into this one arrangement, right? And the reality is, guess what? When like maybe you have your rhythm down, you have your chord shells down, but then like you got bass lines like so. Rootless chords, some of them I know, some of them I don't know, right? But you're throwing all this stuff in and you're like, oh, let me throw some tritone substitutions in, some reharmonization. Let me do all of that. And then the concepts, if you take a look at the song, right? There's all these different concepts in the song, but some of those concepts you don't have as well. They're down low, right? Others are up high, some are down low. Well, guess what? If you're not practicing all of the time, those concepts that are down low that you don't know as well, those are the ones that are going to bite you in the butt when you come back to that song later, right?
Yeah.
So the point of going wide is that these concepts that you're low at, take that concept and blast it through as many different tunes as you can, right? The idea being that when you're focusing, uber focused on that one concept, what's going to naturally happen? You're going to naturally get better at it, okay? Willie, I suck at bass lines. Okay, then do nothing but bass lines on 10 tunes. What do you think is going to happen after you're done with those 10 songs if you did nothing but bass lines on it? You're naturally going to be better at those, right? So that's the whole, hopefully in a nutshell, that's the wide versus deep.
Yeah, got it. It's funny because I have a friend of mine who's a professional sax player. And I said, how'd you get so good? He said, I focused on mastering my pentatonic scales.
Yeah, that's one type of scale.
One
type of scale.
The one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, when anyone says that, there's obviously like it's not that simple because obviously it's not just like, okay. All right, yeah, I mastered it. I have all the notes down. Well, yeah, okay, you got all the notes down, but now can you play it around? Can you play it with rhythm? Can you twist and turn, right? All of that.
And all that stuff.
Right. So, but the point is, by focusing on a pentatonic scale, now your friend is getting rid of half whole diminished, whole half diminished, altered scale, whole tone scale, all of that stuff. So your friend is going to get rid of all those other scales and say, okay, look, I'm just going to go dive deep into pentatonics. I'm going to do that. I'm going to work on my pentatonics and I'm going to get better at that. I did exactly the same thing. There's a great book by Jerry Bergonzi on pentatonics. And I got that book years ago and I practiced that stuff for months. Just pentatonics, and like my pentatonic level playing, increased. Jude asks, is it good to learn a little classical technique to use on jazz, or are we getting that in TCI and SBTD already? So the technique stuff you're not really getting in TCI or Standards by the Dozen because those two courses are not really designed necessarily for the technical stuff. That's more piano essentials. I would caution against, actually, the question I have would be for you, Jude, is what are you considering to be classical technique? Okay. The technique between jazz and classical is not that different, to be honest with you. Right. I know that for some players, they might be like, whoa, wait a minute. No, jazz and classical are radically different. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, definitely, obviously, rhythm is an obvious difference, right? Classical is straight, jazz is swung. Okay. But when it comes to technique, good technique is good technique at the piano. Now, you could get into certain more classical type technical things like, where you're taking multiple fingers on one note like that, is that helpful in jazz? Well, sure, you betcha is. See, I can utilize that in my lines, of course. But that's more of like, if we had to call it a classical kind of technique, I don't really think of it that way. But I would just think of it in terms of like good technique. You want to learn good technique. Some of the things, if we think about jazz technique for a second, that I see oftentimes, and then, it's kind of funny, you could even I'm curious if this would work. I want to show you something. You can kind of see it here. All right, so I just put in a jazz pianist cartoon, right? And what do you notice? You see a lot, right? So do you see this stuff? Do you see how with like jazz, it's always like, you know, everyone always has bad technique, right? Even him right here, he's sitting too far back, right? This guy right here, and bear in mind, I realize these are cartoons, but cartoons, like anything else, like jokes and whatnot, they're kind of like deep rooted. There's a little bit of truth in them, right? How many times you see jazz pianists and it's like this guy right here, like, you know, like doing this kind of stuff. This guy head down, right? And, you know, all this bad technique. We're so used to kind of like almost in this like joking way with being a jazz pianist to embrace this bad technique. Like if I'm a jazz pianist, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this, you know, and like, you know, someone be like, yeah, he's a jazz pianist. No, he's a bad pianist, right? This is not good piano technique. Now you might say, wait a second, Keith Jarrett, you know, doing all this kind of stuff. Sure, that's what Keith Jarrett does, but Keith Jarrett's technique is gorgeous. He knows how to always come back to center with his technique. So he's able to kind of twist and turn and do all of this kind of stuff with his playing. So the main thing the point I'm making is that good technique is critical, because if you don't have good technique at your instrument, then it's going to be virtually impossible for you to really, truly find your best self at the instrument, okay? You're not going to be able to express yourself fully and completely if you don't have the technique to back it up, right? One other musician to take a look at, I won't bother to load it up right now, but go to YouTube and take a look at Joe Henderson, saxophone player. Really interesting, that cat, you know, he'll play, and he doesn't move at all, right? It's like he's just very still, right? Because all of his focus is going where? Right there, right in his horn, right? It's all about that. So it's not like, you know, whereas like, you know, you like take a look at like some R&B saxophone player or like, you know, Billy Joel, like I forget who his saxophone player was, but like, you know, some of that stuff, you know, bam, bam, you know, doing all this kind of stuff because they're putting on a show. I get it. That's fine. But the point is all of this extraneous stuff gets in the way of what? Of us getting our ideas out through the instrument and us really being able to express ourselves. So technique, if we had to find one thing, if there was one thing that we had to say, hey, look, what should I really make sure that I'm always practicing and focusing on? Technique is it, right? If you don't have a lot of time to practice, even 5-10 minutes of just sitting down, centering yourself for 5 minutes, doing a little bit of technique stuff, that's going to be super important, right? Because technique is what's going to carry you through for years. Let's see. Yes, good technique also helps to prevent injury. Oh yeah, David Sanborn played for Billy Joel. He wasn't who I saw in a live concert, but yeah, that's good to know. Thank you, Virgil. Gustavo, on Misty lead sheet from Singers by the Dozen, measure 17, why did you choose to add the B flat underneath the melody rather than the D flat? Okay, hold on a second. Let me take a peek. It could be a mistake. There's always a possibility it's a mistake. So let's see. You said the show.
It's on the G minor 7 flat 5.
And then you said measure 17. Oh yeah. Okay. Rather than D flat. Okay. Let's talk about that for a sec. So right here. Yeah. From measure 15. Right? So the G minor 7 flat 5. Why did I add this rather than the D flat? I did that mostly because just trying to get you to understand that idea of having that third down there because we're utilizing that third or seventh with the thumb so much rather than the flatted 5. I personally would do this. So if you could reach that, that would be better. The problem with just doing this is that's also a little bit harsh sounding. So I just went to just the plain old G minor. But if you like that sound, more than welcome to do that, or you could even do that, kind of do the full chord, right? But the idea here is that these bottom notes that you're choosing, see how that's the third, the seventh, the third, the seventh, the third, the third, right? So you're kind of like having this idea of like, okay, I'm gonna throw the third or the seventh with my thumb underneath. That's why I chose the B flat.
Yeah, the reason I asked because on the real book these only had G minor 7 flat 5, and here you, sorry, only had G minor 7 and you put G minor 7 flat 5, but there wasn't the flat 5 anywhere. So I was wondering if it was a mistake or if it was on purpose.
Now that brings up another great point, and that is that, right, it says G minor 7 flat 5, but wait a second, there's no flat 5 in there. So is it still a G minor 7 flat 5 chord? Well, yeah, because you shouldn't think that like okay, like let's take something simple like A minor 7, okay? So right here, right? So now I have this listed as an A minor 7, right? There's no E in there. So is it an A minor 7?
It still is. Yeah, but you have the third. And,
Couldn't it be an A minor 7 flat 5?
yeah.
Right? So the point is that you're not going to have every note of the chord represented every single time. So sometimes you might have notes that are taken out of the chord, like for instance here, the G minor 7 flat 5. Just didn't put it in right there because we're just doing this shells arrangement. And I also wanted that. See how I'm thumb to thumb, I'm right there. Okay. And so this is still a G minor 7 flat 5 chord, even though the flatted 5th is not represented in the actual printed music. Okay, but like I said, you could add that in, absolutely. The reason also we want to put in G minor 7 flat 5, even though it's not written in here, is let's say that, you know, you come along and you're like, oh, okay, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to just play these 4 notes. I want to play a fuller chord. I know that's what Willie wrote, but I want a full chord. So I'm going to play that G minor 7, right? Well, guess what, though? Not really a G minor 7. You want it as the G minor 7 flat 5, okay? So even though this chord symbol up here, it's not all represented down there, we still want that chord symbol to be the proper chord symbol, because when someone comes along and says, hey, look, forget those 4 notes. I'm not playing those 4 notes. I'm taking a look at this right here, and I'm going to do my own thing there, Willie. Okay, well, fine. You got to make sure that that gives them the, you know, the information that they need to be able to be successful with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
You got it. Let's see. Any other questions? Anyone on? Any other questions? Anyone else want to share any playing? Gil, you have a question? Go ahead. You need to unmute yourself. There you go, man.
Okay. I backtracked a little bit. I'm on. Can you hear me? Okay. Oh, okay. I'm with the on the altered chords. I studied that lesson number 19, and I'm starting to get it. You know, I get the scale, I get the color, and my question is not how to use it, but when. You know, when it's appropriate to use the altered scale. I know I can use it on a dominant chord, an altered chord, but in the music, should I use it at a spot when I'm leading to another certain type of chord? Is it, you know, that's, I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying.
No, sure. All right. So your altered chord is, if we go back to C7, right? An altered chord is going to be typically like a flat 9 or sharp 9 with probably an alteration of the 13, like a flat 9 with a flat 13, sharp 9 with a flat 13. You know, maybe you might have like a flat 9 with a sharp 11 in there. Basically, you're going to have some alterations to those tensions, right? 9, 11, and 13 are your basic tensions. So alterations meaning flat 9, sharp 9, flat 13, sharp 11, stuff like that, okay? Now, where you can use them pretty much wherever you want with that color, as long as it works with the melody. If you're playing the melody. If you're just like comping chords or you're in the middle of your solo, well then, you know, you could pretty much do whatever you want at that point. You could throw in an altered chord. So here, you know, if I take this A minor 7, here, flat 13, sharp 9. Now here, on my F7, let me throw this in. Sharp 9, flat 13, right? But you see how the melody note is a C? Yeah, maybe that's not the best choice. So instead I might just go to flat 9 there, right? That sounds a lot better. What about this on the C7, right? Now there's really no melody note underneath the C7. So here I know it says flat 9. Forget it. I'm going to put in sharp 9, flat 13. I can do that, right? The only time it's really going to matter is when the melody is a specific note that you need to like make sure that you're hitting that, and you want to make sure that the tensions that you're choosing are not conflicting with that melody note. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we're talking chordal now. I'm talking like as an improvising a melody. You know, you're like chordal, yeah, but.
So now, in improvisation, kind of the same rules apply, right? So in improvisation, you know, again, like let's say I'm going to take that D7 chord. Okay, what I need to now ask myself is, do I want that much tension here? So now that I'm in the improvisation vein, you know, even if I'm just doing shells, right? Just going to do shells in the left hand, forget the rootless chord, right? So like. Right? The question I need to ask myself is, do I want that much tension there? And maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe I want... Right? Maybe on the D7 chord, I don't want as much tension. Let's go over to the G minor, C, F minor, B flat. Now, first of all, when the chords are only 2 beats a piece, you have a limited amount of time anyway, right? So, so with that, you don't have a lot of time to like, you know, you don't have all this time to go play all these notes. So you're you know, going to be limited in how many notes you could play to begin with. So then it's like, right? Do I want that much tension? You know, maybe I do, maybe I don't. But you can really utilize that altered scale wherever it is that you want. It's just dialing in the tension or dialing it back. So again, on the G minor to C7, I'll just take, you know, 4 notes, G minor. All right, so you see how I went? Now I'm ending at F minor. Playing 4 notes of G minor, right? It's pretty simple. Triad with the 9th. Now I'm coming into that altered scale for C7. I'm literally just coming down those 4 notes of the altered scale. And when I hit the C, I'm hitting the 5th of F. So, and then here, rather than playing D natural, I'm playing it as just G minor 7. I want to probably do like, right, because it's G minor 7 flat 5. But now that creates that certain amount of tension. Maybe I don't want that much tension. So then maybe I might do. maybe something like that. I'm just literally arpeggiating the chord. Or maybe I just want with the flat 9 in there. That sounds nice. So do you see how like different scales are going to give you different spice and color in your improvisation? That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, one thing that's really good to think about with that altered scale is that it's good to kind of think of it as two different scales, right? So you have your altered part right here, and then you have like your whole tone scale up here, and that's why some people call it an altered whole tone, you know, or a diminished whole tone, because this first 4 notes are the same as your half whole diminished scale. There's your half whole diminished scale. So those 4 notes of the first 4 notes are the same. These are the notes from your whole tone scale. So these notes up here are going to get a different vibe than this. Like, listen to what happens.
Yeah.
Like, right? So I gets that kind of like, I like to say it kind of has like almost like a little bit of a Middle Eastern-y kind of vibe to it. Like,
That's what I was hearing.
yeah. So whereas this, since they're all whole steps, you don't get that half step rub in there. So it sounds a little bit more open sounding, right? So each part of the scale has kind of like 2 parts to it, and each part gives a little bit of a different flavor. So one of the best things you could do is practice just one chord. Like, you know, let's go to F. Is my altered scale. So I hit root 5, I'll hit a altered rootless chord down there, and now I'm just gonna like hang around playing on these 4 notes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I got that, and that. So I'm just going to play around with that chord, and I'm going to kind of see how the different parts of the scale and just kind of the sound of that altered scale, how that works. Let me give you this as an analogy. This might help. So if my Yeti mug, okay, for coffee, okay? So now, how do I want to describe? I'm super excited about this mug, right? I just got it, right? And I'm super excited, and I want to tell you how excited I am about this mug. So then I'm going to use different adjectives. Oh, it's great. It's awesome. You know, it works so well. It's solid, right? So I have these different adjectives that I'm going to grab at from my vocabulary. I'm going to bring them out, and they're going to come out, you know, like, you know, my mouth, so that you can hear and understand what I'm saying. All right. So if I say to you, it's solid versus it's awesome, that's going to give you a different, right? It's going to trigger something in your brain when you're listening to those words. You're going to hear the word solid, and now you might think it's quality, it's made well. You might think it's heavy, right? Solid, right? If I say it's awesome, then it's like, oh, it's like, you know, that's kind of exciting. You know, he really likes it. It probably works well. So my point is this, that the words that we choose when we're utilizing language, right, will give the listener, okay, a kind of an idea of what we're trying to say, obviously, but they'll also kind of give them a sense of, like, they're going to bring in, they're going to, how do I want to say this? They're going to take that word, and then they're going to build their own ideas from that word, right? Their own opinion from what it is that I use to describe that. So that happens in improvisation as well. So if I bring in that altered scale, that's going to make that improvisation sound a certain way. Whereas if I bring in, say, like pentatonic scales, that's going to give it more of an open sound. If I bring in more chromaticism, that's probably going to be a little bit more bebop-ish. Pentatonic scale will sound more modern sounding, right? So if I want to do, there's my altered scale. Altered scale. Right? Now, let me stay with one chord for a little bit longer so that you can actually hear the sound of the scale. And let's just go with G minor to C7 to F major. All right, so if I'm utilizing my pentatonic scale now, right, you hear it gets kind of like more of a modern sound. If I use my chromatic scale, right, kind of gets more of that bebop-ish kind of sound, right? If I use more of a, you know, like a modal sound, like, let's say I'm going to like, you know, that kind of might get you kind of thinking or hearing more of that Dorian. Right? So now when I move to the C7 chord, here, let's say I just do root 3/7, keep it real open. Now I can play around with my different scales. It's like, all right, this time let me just try Mixolydian. All right, so I get a certain sound with the Mixolydian scale. Let me try my half-whole diminished scale. All right, get that sound. Let me try my whole tone scale. All right, let me try my altered scale. Let me try pentatonic starting on the 9th. Right, so I can kind of like mess around with that, and I can kind of take that, go in and out. But you see how each one of those scales and ideas gives you a different flavor, right? Does that make sense, Gil?
Yeah, I think I'm going to. Yeah, I think I'm going to start. I'm going to change my. I practice scales every, you know, like not every day, but every, you know, so often just run up and down in my different modes and stuff. I think I'm going to start thinking of them in a different way in relationship to a chord and playing with the scale instead of doing it scalular, you know, scalular. Start just playing, stick to one. Maybe I'll pick a certain scale and just play with that for like a day, you know.
With the chord in the left hand, you're saying?
Well, with the chord, with the relative chord in the left hand.
Yeah. Because what happens, like if I just like say, all right, well, there's my altered scale. I'm playing it hands together, but you notice how I'm not really getting the sound and the flavor of that scale, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't have this. Right? I don't have that chord sound going on down here that supports what's going on with that scale, right? So yeah, so I definitely think that's a great approach. Play the chord in the left hand, play your scale in the right hand. Take even like major. Right, so there's pentatonic scale, right? So now what does it sound like if I use my major scale? Right, so you get a different sound moving from pentatonic to major scale, even though pentatonic scale, right? So pentatonic scale, right? I'm just doubling the root up here, right? And major scale. So the only difference is I'm adding those two notes in with the major scale, but it changes the flavor of the sound, right? Now, I can use either one of those scales. I could also bring in, I could bring in my Lydian scale as well. Okay, so I can utilize that. So going back to your original question is of like, well, which scale should I be using? And, you know, can I use that altered scale anywhere? Yeah. I mean, the answer is that, like, especially when it comes to improvisation, again, let's just take the major chord. You could use your major scale, major pentatonic. Yeah, you could use your Lydian scale. Okay, and those are just those three right there. You could use your major bebop scale, that kind of stuff as well. So you've seen the Jamie Aebersold books, I'm sure, right?
Oh yeah, I have them. Yeah, I have a couple.
So remember in the back of the book, they had the scale chart, right? And it would say like major seventh chord, and it would tell you like these 3 or 4 different scales that you could use, right? And it would say dominant seventh, and it would list out all these different scales you could use, minor seven, all these different scales. It always used to drive me crazy because it would drive me nuts because my question was always like, okay, that's great, I could use all those scales. Well, which one do I pick, right? And the reality is it took years to understand that it's spice. Okay, so, you know, if you want to make, I don't know, a soup, okay, can you use salt? Sure. How much salt do you use? It's personal preference. Can you use pepper? Sure, right? Now, can you put cayenne pepper in a soup, Gil?
It depends on what flavor you want. Depends on what you like.
And there you go. And that's what it's all about. So you could, right? There's nothing going to stop you, and it would probably still taste good, right? Depending on how much you use. So that's the point, is that like a lot of this stuff, it gets down to personal preference and gets down to the sound that you're looking for. So the real question is not what scales can I use or when can I use them? The real question is the scales that I want to use, do I know what they sound like? Right? That's the question. Okay. You know, do you know the sound of the scale? Because going back to our analogy of the soup and the cayenne pepper, if you had no idea what cayenne pepper tasted like, right? You see the inherent problem there, right? So when it comes to improvisation, you want to know the sound of those scales. You want to know, what does a pentatonic scale sound like? What does that major scale sound like? What does a half-whole diminished scale sound like? An altered scale, right? You know, what sound am I looking for? If I'm like... So isn't that a very interesting sound? Now, you might not, like, if I were to just play that and I would ask you what scale is that, you might not even immediately say, oh, that's the altered scale. You know, you might say something else, right? So, but that gets that kind of sound on the altered scale. So you have to play around with the scale, and exactly like you said, take the chord, play the chord, run the scale over it, run it many different ways, all different permutations, so you can really start to get that sense of this is what that scale sounds like against that type of harmony.
Maybe to keep it interesting, I'll take your exercise, I think it was 17, inspiration, that goes through all 12 keys, and just worry about, take one, maybe take the altered scale and hit it every time I hit the dominant chord.
Yeah, and absolutely, yeah.
And that would keep you from getting boring, you know?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
maybe I'll do that.
It's great. Like if you have like, you know, like if you're just doing even like a 2-5-1, right? So you can kind of elongate it a little bit on the 2 chord. You know, you could play around with that pentatonic scale. Right, so now we've said on the 2-5-1 that you could run just the major scale up and down, right? We know that. We can utilize our C major scale over all the chords of a 2-5-1. that works. But that's obviously not the only thing that works, right? So now in this particular example, I'm going to say, okay, look, I'm going to take my minor pentatonic scale that I want to run that on the minor chord. So those are the notes on my D minor. And when I get to the G7, I want to play the first 4 notes or maybe the first 5 notes of the altered scale. Notice what I did here? Thumb on the 7th, right? And then going up to the root.
Oh yeah.
And then when I get to the major, then maybe I'll do the I'll do the full major scale. And then maybe to start, no iReal Pro, nothing like that. I'll just kind of like play around with this. So you see how it's like out of time? I'm just kind of like playing around with the scale, just trying to get the feel, the flavor, the sound of it, trying to get it underneath my fingertips until finally then. Now I can start to create lines more in time.
And with those exercises you gave us with the rootless chords, I'm getting to the point now, since I'm using the rootless chord, I've been working on that. I'm starting to hear the root even when it's not played, when I play the chord.
Good.
It's starting to get there. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
I can hear it in my head. Yeah.
I like hearing that. All right. So any other questions before we finish up? I got time for... oh, that was nice. Thank you, Bill. Can't stay, but nice to see you're still at it. Real good to see you. Been at this for a while now, haven't I, Bill? It's funny how, like, you get to the point where I've been doing this for so long. I have students that come in, they go out, they come in. It's like, I've been online for 20 years now. So some students have, seen my stuff back in 07, 08, 09, and then they kind of do something else and they come back for a little while. So it's nice to see that big musical family. So does anyone have any other question before we wrap up?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah. It's kind of like on the trifecta.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great idea. You have the trifecta on the dashboard page.
Thank you.
Because you can go to everything from there that you need in those programs. However, now there's becoming to be so many things. I think it's kind of like what Gary Thomas was saying. And you're talking today about focusing and things like that. Finding some of the things, there's so many like questions and answers. In the Confident Improviser, you have the question and answer replays. Actually, they're in two places, in both on each lesson and then in the community, both.
They're no longer in the lesson page. They're all in the community.
Okay.
They're
Thank
all
you.
in,
So
they're all in the community.
they're all in
area.
one place.
Yep.
Yeah, and then also like today, this will last 2 hours. And the thing is, going through some of the question and answers or the office sessions or whatever, they can last, like one is over an hour and 40 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is, trying to go through the trifecta, and I've been trying to catch up. I've been off the site for a while, and oh my God, like the Days of Wine and Roses is over 7 hours. and you're doing a standard, is it every 2 weeks?
Every month. Every month.
It is every month. Okay, yep. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's good. It's just that when you have no reference point in any of these to go back through the recordings, you have to do a lot of searching. And I think I brought this up before months ago, but it's really hard. It takes a lot of time to go through this. Mm-hmm. Plus, you have to go through all the programs of Standards by the Dozen, and then also the Confident Improviser. And I don't know, some of the questions and answers, maybe some can cross now between the Confident Improviser and Standards by the Dozen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting harder and harder to follow.
All right. So was there a question in there, or just?
Oh, it's just kind of
a comment?
a comment.
Oh, okay.
All
right.
I mean, it'd be really difficult. I guess I could go through each recording and then write down, oh, it went through this, because one time you went through, like gospel, and some of these question and answers are almost, it's like a lesson.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
it's, I mean, a lot of information, and I should have marked that. Now I have to go back probably through months trying to find that one,
like
question and answer.
All right, so the lessons on the site, okay, let's just pull that up here. So
yeah, it's just that it's becoming a little overwhelming.
Sure, absolutely. So let me make it less overwhelming for you. All right. So first of all, there's a ton of material right here. Okay.
Exactly.
There's a bunch of material right here, and there's not much I can do about the amount of material that's right here. I mean, it's one of those things where it is what it is, right? I mean, it's like there has to be, a centralized location for this material. The good thing, though, is the material is in order, meaning that, you could just go right here, boom, 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 right on down, go right here, go right on down, and then same thing for the essentials, right? So you could really just kind of work through it right on down, right?
Yeah, I really like the drop downs.
Now, the Q&A sessions, the coaching sessions, yeah, there's a ton of information in those. And quite frankly, there's so much information in those sessions that really ends up getting lost. And the challenge is that, okay, so what would it take in order to not lose that information? Well, what it would take is that the video would have to be gone through, it would have to be tagged at certain locations in the video to say, okay, this is where I'm talking about a 2-5-1 progression. This is where I'm talking about this. This is where I'm talking about that. The reason I don't do that is because I'm not convinced that, well, number one, it's like a crazy amount of work, right? I mean, like it would just be insane to go through all that video and really tag what's being said in each one of those locations. The other thing too is that
I realize that.
Yeah.
It might be nice to know the major topics.
Yeah, and then
in each. So I say, well, where was the gospel? And go down, and then it says in this question and answer had gospel, and of course that list could be very long.
Right. I mean, like that right there, just going through all the replays, and then you have all of that stuff in there. The challenge is that then could shoot, change the focus, right? So then now students are going through this whole list of all the Q&As, and they're like, now that's categorized, and now I want to see this. And this is why a lot of times I end up going through some of the same stuff. We'll talk about rootless voicings. We'll talk about wide versus deep. We'll talk about shells. Like, so there's a lot of these themes, right, that go on, and they keep percolating and going over and over and over again. And even though that in a way is not that efficient, right? We could say, well, wait, you're saying the same stuff, or you're talking about the same concepts. Yeah. The reason I don't mind doing it, and the reason that I think that it's good to be done, is that it takes students sometimes just a while for that light bulb to click. And too often what I've done in the past, well, and you could see it right on the site. Like, you go into the site, you go into the search, I'll put in a like 2-5-1, right? I go into here and I got all of this, and I can get in here and I can, start to see all these different tags, and I could say, okay, I want to, do 2-5-1 licks. And then, students will get into here and, okay, let me go through these 2-5-1 licks. But then guess what happens? They still end up having more questions on this stuff anyway. That's why I do the live sessions. So the point is, the live sessions are not categorized like the lessons, in part on purpose, okay? Because in the live session, I don't want the live session to be necessarily like a lesson for you. If you have a question, right, come and ask on the live session, and I'll either direct you to the place to look or show it to you right then and there. And even though, yes, I might be showing it again, the way that I explain it that time is going to resonate with someone differently. right? I've just learned over the years so many times. I've heard from students like, I've seen your lessons on this kind of stuff, but the way you explained it just now I got it. So it's like, it's one of those things where like, that's my job, is to like show it to you several different ways until finally you get it. Does that make sense, Keith?
Yeah, it does. It's just that there can be questions that can be asked over and over again.
Yep.
But yeah, and I know it would be way too much work, but there are so many recordings.
Over 800 hours.
And they go back how far? Willie,
years.
back to 2018 or?
Some of the coaching stuff, goes back pretty darn far. I mean, I've been doing this live coaching stuff for like 5, 6, 7 years now. But in the community area, I think like, you're probably talking at least 3, 4 years that it's going back.
Right. No, exactly. I just have to make it a point to see it live.
Well, either see it live or
trying to catch up is difficult.
Yeah. The other thing that I would be willing to do that would be relatively easy for me to do to bring into the workflow, and you guys can go ahead and chat in if you agree with this. Say yes if you like the idea. Well, just say yes if you like the idea. If you don't like the idea, then don't chat anything. But what I could do is in the community replay area, I can also have like an MP3 file. And then maybe what I could do is I could set it up so that there's a section of the site where like you don't watch the video, but you could just listen to, all of the coaching and all of these live sessions. And then that way you can kind of hear it in the car, right? So you could be listening on the go, and that might be a way in which you can kind of get that information without having to sit there watching a video. Would that be helpful, Keith?
Yeah, that would. And sometimes what
you don't sound convinced.
I have an old car.
Okay.
but I could put it on the iPhone. But sometimes what I'll do, I'll just put it at a fast speed, 1.75. Yeah. And so when there's talking, things like that, it can go by fast or just search around. But no, it's just that sometimes there's so much information and good information on the question and answers.
Yeah, it's
and coaching.
I wish that I could have a better approach for that. It's just the only other approach that I could do is if students would be interested is allowing you guys to get in and we crowdsource this where you apply tags, right? Where you could say in this particular video, talking about 251, talking about gospel, talking about this. And then as students go through and they apply those tags or mark the video, then that's to the benefit of them and everyone else too. So that's another option as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So
especially as some of the presentations that stand out, that is a lot of information.
Yeah, because I get it. Like these sessions go on for a while, and you know, and I want to remind everyone, you don't have to stay for the whole session. Like it's no skin off my back. I don't mind if you come, go. You know, if you can come to a session, great. If you can't, then fine. I stay on for the benefit of students. So if students are like, you know, they're leaving and like there's no one here, and they're like, okay, see you guys, see you later. It's actually a beautiful day outside, so I should be able to get some sun outside today.
Right.
But there is the benefit of like, I find that I think a lot of students like hearing some of that information, even if it's the same information, because it helps them to lock it in, you know, and it helps them to think about it in a different way and lock it in a different way. So that's why I do it.
Okay, great. And it's great that you do it too.
Oh, thank you.
Willie.
Thank
I appreciate it.
All right. So, oh, okay. Yeah, that's great, Sherry. Sherry had a great idea. I have a spreadsheet on my iPad and take notes so that what I want to go back to is searchable. It works great. Thanks for an amazing site. Thank you, Sherry. And thank you, Jaco from Mexico. The other thing I want to just remind you guys about is this as well. In the, you can't really see that. Well, let's do this. So in the My Jazz Edge, right, these playlists, this is also very, very useful. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can kind of see, right? So these playlists that I can have. So then let's say that I have, I want to go to this lesson here, my 251. I just simply click this add to playlist. I could add it to my favorites as well, and the favorites will show up right over, where is it? Oh yeah, right here, your favorites, okay? So here, I'll add this to favorites. Now, bear in mind, I just added it to favorites, so if I go up there, it's not gonna be there. I need to refresh the page, okay? But the other thing I could do is add it to a playlist. I choose a playlist. What do I have? My lessons to learn. I'll add it to that one. Add it to a playlist. And now when I go back to my dashboard, I will see that you see the 251s are right there. And then my playlist, I have it right there as well at the bottom of my playlist. Okay. So just another way in which you can utilize those tools. You might find that helpful and useful as well. All right. All right. So anyway, the end of another long session. So how about adding tags to your live videos? Okay. Yep. So, all right. So I will work on that. The ability for you guys to be able to tag some of those videos or add some notes to that. It's going to be a little bit of coding on my side. So it's going to take me a little bit of time to do that, but it's in my brain now and I will work on that. All right. So with that said, thank you guys for joining me. Remember, every other Thursday, I do the TCI. And so I will see you again on the 25th. All right. So only this week we did office hours and TCI together. So everything next week is back to normal. And just as a quick reminder, before I let you all go, remember there is no TCI lesson being released this week. We're going to go on an every other week schedule now, give you guys some time to digest what's already there, and then also make it so that this new material, which is going to be starting to get progressively harder, that you'll have now 2 weeks to be able to practice it. So Friday, the 19th, is when the next TCI lesson is going to come out. And Thursday, the 25th of March, is when the next live Q&A session is going to be. All right. Office hours will be next Wednesday on the 24th. Oh, I'm sorry, next Wednesday on the 17th will be office hours. Okay. So a week from today, 1 o'clock, we will have our office hours as normal. All right. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining me. I'll talk to you guys later.